Welcome to Baseball and Coffee, episode 59 with Tino and Aaron. What's up, Aaron?
Morning. How are you?
Good, man. Braving the snow here in Walla Walla right now, but can't complain. Baseball's on its way. Today we are going to cover outfield 3, which in our league is outfield 33 through outfield 48. We'll do our best to dig in and not get sick to our stomachs based on the quality of players in this grouping.
I got to 48 today. I'm proud of myself. Last time I only got to like 30 out of 32.
Right on. I think I went to about 60, but not in depth, and there's nobody there that I'm truly after. Any coffee stories for us this week?
Nothing major for me. I had some Kenya this morning as my first cup. It was awesome.
Nice.
But no major adventures on my side. Just standard basket brew each morning. I do have some Papua New Guinea that I'm going to be breaking out at some point, but I'm going to hold on until I have a couple days at home where I can really savor it.
Nice.
It's one of my favorite coffees in the world.
Nice. Same here. Sticking with the Ethiopia, the organic Ethiopia with Walla Walla Roastery, still enjoying it. Happy to kind of be back enjoying African coffee because I went through a period of probably a couple of years where I was staying away from it for the most part. Went to a coffee shop here in Walla Walla yesterday that is more of a skateboard shop, but they have a Marzocco and a Malkonig, and they bring in a couple of roasters from the Spokane area. Kind of cool. Had an Italiano, was pretty good, but just kind of fun to stumble upon random shops that actually are doing some independent stuff and pull a decent shot. So shout out to the FVC gallery. Like I said, skateboard and clothes, and it's next to my barbershop. So shout out. Good cup of coffee.
I thought of you yesterday because I went to the farmer's market and I stopped and got a cup of coffee at Passenger and was drinking it as I was going through the farmer's market, and as it cooled down, it was getting really fruity. And I thought of our discussion about how coffee changes and yeah, it's just I was like really enjoying it, even though it was basically room temperature because it was still a lot of flavor and just
Right.
didn't taste papery at all.
I think
All these fruit tones were coming out, and I was like, wow, this is really, really good.
that's we talked about. That's one of my favorite things to kind of taste it over the temperature spectrum and see how it changes.
I'm gonna bring you some coffee from Passenger, and I can't wait to hear what you think of it.
Oh, we have to talk about. Let's take two seconds to talk about how are we going to brew our coffee in Arizona.
Well, after I say hello to everyone, my next thing is going to be to go in there to the kitchen and see what we have to work with, and probably do an Instacart order so that I can have some groceries to eat and coffee to brew. And I guess I could go back and find the listing for the house and see what kind of brewer they have. But I'm definitely not throwing any glassware in my suitcase. I don't think it'll make it there in one piece, but definitely have to locate either some cafes or we got to have like at least a Mr. Coffee there.
My thought is, so I've always traveled with AeroPress because it's plastic. And I don't even know where it is now. I used to have a Hario hand grinder, but the hand grinders are so inconsistent, the grind is, that didn't always turn out to be a very good cup of coffee. The other option, and this is pretty blasphemous, but it'd be to go to a local roaster and just have them grind a bag of coffee for the brewer that we have, and maybe do it twice since there's going to be enough people drinking coffee. I don't know, but we can figure it out. But that is definitely usually in the top 3 of my priorities for figuring out the minute I get somewhere, figuring out how it's going to work. Either that or there's a great coffee shop around the corner. It's got to be one of the two. I love it. All right, man. Outfield 3. We joked about it a little bit offline prior to getting started here. Let's talk a little bit about, like, what's your overview or your strategy when approaching outfielders once we get to this place where we're like, 30, 35 outfielders in?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the easy thing would be you're going with guys who have a track record, who maybe give yourself something yet and exciting. But over guys who haven't done it, and who have shown either due to prospect pedigree or something in the minors that you think that there's more ceiling there or more to build on, right? But honestly, I didn't see a lot of guys in this range that had a lot of ceiling. So I didn't find myself in that position where I was trying to push up guys and maybe their projections are lower because they don't have experience or track record. It was more guys with a lot of flaws that I was picking through. And the guys I pushed up on my list were more guys I think I believe in a little bit more. Guys like Jesse Winker or somebody like that, who I really believe is a good hitter and whose stats were really terrible last year. And then trying to figure out where I stand on guys like Nick Castellanos, who had a really terrible year, or Hunter Renfroe, who I don't really like as a player at all, or Brendan Nimmo, same kind of thing. He's a good major league player or decent major league player, but for fantasy, he's kind of meh. Or a guy like Jock Peterson, who's a platoon player, right? So there's really no perfect picks in this range.
Right. Yeah, I have in my notes for overview of outfield 3, the first word is shitty. And I have worth going with the guy who's done it before. So you have players like, in theory, players like Joey Gallo, right? And do I love Gallo? No. Is he does he have like more warts than he does pluses? For sure. But he's done it before. The talent's there. You're not wondering about the talent. You're just wondering if he can ever rediscover. Castellanos is a great one. Super terrible year last year. You got to ask yourself questions why. If you dig into these guys and you see reasons to believe in them again, then that's the guy one should go after, right? So Castellanos, Jorge Soler had a 48 or a 46 homer season. Michael Conforto, was a sought after outfielder for a long time who's been hurt, but I believe in the talent. Giancarlo Stanton, right, may not hit 211 this year. And if he hits 250, you've got a, borderline outfield 1 on your hands instead of an outfield 3. And then there's players like Ian Happ who provide balance and not a ton of upside. But for me, when I look at outfield 3, hopefully I'm not picking from this pool in a 3 outfielder league, right? 4 and 5 outfielder league you are, but in a 3 outfielder league, hopefully I'm not picking from this pool. However, if I do, a lot of me thinks just don't hurt me, right? Just don't create any huge voids. So a player like Ian Happ, who last year, he had 641 plate appearances, 72 runs, 72 RBIs, 17 homers, 9 steals, 781 OPS. You got a player who's not giving you much, but he's not hurting you, right? Double-digit home runs, high single-digit steals, 70-plus runs and RBIs. So you're not sweating him. Whereas, there are players who are really imbalanced, who I think can create big problems on your team, especially in Roto, can create big problems down the line. So I don't know. This group is pretty gross to me. I'd rather pick one guy who's consistent and then maybe one guy who has tons of upside, and then just sit on the upside guy if I have the roster spot and see if he can't come through for me. But we should get started. I did do rankings. I'd say that I have 16 guys ranked, but I have another 20, 25 or so that could have been, you could justify putting in those 16. I don't feel incredibly strongly about many of the players on this list. So if you did do rankings, correct? 1 through 16?
Yes, I did.
Who's your one?
So I started out with Newt Barr, who we talked about last pod. I took a closer look at him. We outlined the Cardinals' outfield situation in terms of playing time. They have 5 or 6 guys, competing for those 3 spots. We talked about the Cardinals a lot last time, but I think you did a good job highlighting why you like him. And as I looked closer at him, he checks a lot of boxes for me in terms of age, launch angle, hard hit rates, walk rates, speed. So I definitely understood why you like him so much.
I think there's a trade coming with them for sure.
Yeah.
And part of why I like New Bar is I think he's one of their core players, believe it or not. I think they really believe in him more so than O'Neill, just because O'Neill's been up and down, and more so than Carlson because he hasn't proven it yet. So Of those players, they all seem to be kind of in that same grouping where you could see one really bust out. But I do think he's the one that they have the most belief in outside of Walker.
Yeah, it's
But
interesting
yeah,
because his he's his zone contact rate isn't great, but yet if we look at his swing and miss rate, is actually he's in the top 65%.
right.
So it's a kind of interesting overlay there in terms of his contact ability. But he can take a walk and he does have speed and his barrel rates are very encouraging. So and we've talked a lot about the being more able or more willing to take on someone who approaches a mid 40s ground ball rate,
Mm-hmm.
which he's at 46% last year.
Mm-hmm.
And what that might look like in 2023 with the shift limitations and him being left-handed as well.
Right. I'm excited about him. I don't think he's gonna make it to me, honestly. I hate to say that. Because his ADP is almost too high at this point, even for someone like me who believes in the player. I think he's starting to go really, really high that I didn't anticipate that happening. I have his ground ball rate at 43.8. But yeah, he was my number 11 in outfield 2, but that's not too far away from number 1 in outfield 3. It's what, 6 spots
Right.
away, something like that.
Yeah.
We're pretty much on the same page. My outfield 1 my number 1 for outfield 3 is Masataka Yoshida, who was the signing out of the Japanese league by the Boston Red Sox. It looks like he's going to hit leadoff for the Red Sox this year. I don't know that we have any real science in terms of understanding what players from Asia are going to do in the major leagues. It's a bit of a, we can scout all we want, but that transition is one that isn't very predictable as of yet. And I think anyone who feels like they can predict it is a little ahead of themselves. But that said, all the projection systems have him at between, at least the ones on Fangraphs, he's between 15 and 20 home runs, between 65 and 85 runs. He's between 60 and 82 RBIs, between 2 and 5 steals. And most everyone has him at for a double-digit walk rate and a low double-digit K rate. So high contact, takes a walk, will hit double-digit home runs, hit at the top of a Red Sox lineup that we're not really sure what to make of yet. But what's interesting is all of the projected OPS numbers for him are above 800. And so I like that from him. And I think that that's going to be of value. If you can get a greater than 800 OPS from your outfield 3 or from an outfielder, 32 and up, without hurting you in other places, that's a very, very good place to be. I would worry about his RBI total, given that he's going to hit leadoff in all likelihood. And is the bottom of the Red Sox lineup going to be good enough to create RBI opportunities for him? But it seems to me, by all accounts, a solid player. And if those projections are close to being correct, he's my number 1 here. I have a bunch of players of similar profile to him. Ian Happ, he and Ian Happ were really similar for me. I talked about Happ, 72 runs, 72 RBIs, 17 homers, 9 steals, 781 OPS. Very similar vein. Lower OPS, but of course, the one we're talking about for Yoshida is projected. So we don't even know if that's really the case. I think Benintendi is a very similar player, right?
Yes.
Benintendi has come out and said, he's my number 2. He's come out and said that he really did change his approach in Kansas City because of the park and was not trying to hit home runs in Kansas City. So if we think that he's being truthful about his swing approach and heading to playing for the White Sox, now we're looking at a player who is probably going to decrease his average slightly, may see his power come up slightly, is comfortable that he signed a long-term deal with the White Sox. And I think we can see a Yoshida type year, projected Yoshida type year from Benintendi as well. I like this type of player in the outfield 3 range. I'd say that without the speed, Verdugo has a little bit of that to him. I think
Hmm.
Quan has a little bit of that to him. I think Quan has more speed upside and maybe less homer upside. But I have
Hmm.
Verdugo at 7. I have Quan at 8. I have who else here? You could say Jeff McNeil has some of that, right? McNeil and Quan, I think, are similar. McNeil might hit for a higher average. Quan might have more steals. But a lot of players that fit this mold of top of the order, worry about RBIs, but not going to hurt you in a stat. And I think that's the safe play for outfield 3. Any comments on that?
No, I like it. I have Yoshida in the same kind of cluster with Benintendi, Nimmo, and then Yoshida.
Mm-hmm.
I think all things being equal, I would be probably truthfully like most excited about Yoshida. The reason I moved him down was just I tend to get overexcited about the players coming in and have not done a good enough job of backing down expectations, and especially in that year one of transition. And so I'm trying to course correct. So maybe over course correcting. But like you, I see him very similarly as especially like at a Benintendi.
Mm-hmm.
Although I think he probably, at least based on the scouting report, has a better hit tool than the Benintendi. But also, I think Benintendi has a little bit more demonstrated speed, and we've seen him be at least a 15-15
Right.
type guy.
Right.
Like you, I've read the same things about him saying he's going to change his approach. Um, you can decide for yourself if you think he's a talented enough hitter just to do that or not.
Mm-hmm.
I know the year he really sold out for power in Boston, he really posted his worst season. And so sometimes I worry, sometimes he overrates his ability to adjust a little bit. But
Mm-hmm.
I do like Benintendi. He's projected at number 2 in the lineup for the White Sox,
Yep.
which is not lead off, but it's really, high up there. So um, yeah, I have it Benintendi and then Nimmo and then Yoshida. Nimmo, as long as he's healthy, will be a leadoff hitter
Mm-hmm.
for the Mets, who I think of the three, like he has, I mean, like the least power speed appeal, but he is also he brings that walk rate
Yep.
and a high volume of plate appearances
Yep.
when he's healthy. But he doesn't have a great track health record, which is one of the reasons why we were so surprised that he got that contract he did.
Right. I have Nimmo at 3, so we're right on the same. I think on the same wavelength. Yoshida 1, Benintendi 2, Nimmo 3. You can't ignore Nimmo's on base percentage or his runs scored. Right, 102 runs last year. I think provided health, it's probably similar types of numbers. I don't having that like 60 RBI total as an outfield 3 is a bit scary, especially if you don't feel like there's much upside there. And then there's no steals with that player, right? So oftentimes you see those high run totals type of player hitting higher in the order that you have to make up for their RBIs in your fantasy team actually be able to help you with steals. And the fact that he hurts you in 2 different categories in my mind makes him a player that I tend to stay away from.
Right.
I also I think he's a jerk. So there's that too. Take it for what
Yeah.
it's worth. But I try not to downgrade him in my rankings because of it. I just won't take him on my team because of it. That's just me.
Yeah.
So the next grouping or the next type of player that we're looking at or that I'm looking at is the player who is, the platoon power player, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or
Yep.
the power player that has platoon potential, meaning we might see him as a player that is a well-rounded player right now, but his platoon splits are bad enough that there's a potential for him to only be that. So we should actually dig a little more into that idea. So Jock Peterson, I have at 5. That's why I brought it up. Jock Peterson last year, 874 OPS, right? 23 home runs, 433 plate appearances, is very clearly a righty masher, and sits versus lefties. The Giants are pretty analytic heavy, and I think they realize that. So you look at him, and 57 runs is not great. 70 RBIs is decent. However, because his rate stats are so good, right? That 874 OPS is hugely valuable. How do
Yeah.
you value a player like Peterson? Are you willing to have him on your roster and play him against right-handed pitching knowing he's going to boost your OPS and home run and RBI total, but that you're going to have to carry, because you value Peterson, you're going to have to carry an additional outfielder to make up for the fact that he doesn't play every day. Is that a
Yeah,
story
I think
that you're interested in?
I think it would be for outfield 3, 4. It's not something I've done a ton of, but in a daily league where we can really play that matchup every single day. Although there's been times where early starts and something like that, there's 35% of the time sometimes you're on the wrong side of a lineup decision in terms of games lock early in the day. You got to make a decision on someone who doesn't play until
Right.
9 o'clock West Coast time, and you're on the wrong side of that. So even in a daily league, you're not sure to get all that production.
Right.
That being said, I think on a per plate appearance base, I throw Winker in this basket as well, although he had a crap
100%.
year last year.
100%.
But I still think and look at their true talent as a hitter and the things I look for, especially down here where guys where we don't have guys with no speed, right? So like Castellanos, Stanton, Renfroe, these guys have no speed, so he doesn't necessarily give anything back to them. I
Right.
think he's probably a better overall hitter in terms of approach and contact and launching on those kinds of things. So I have Winker and Peterson right next to each other. I prefer Winker just because I think he's a better hitter, but I think Peterson's probably the better play because he's been more durable and he's younger.
Right.
Actually, no, that's not true. He's 29. He's 30,
Wait,
and
yeah, Winker's 28.
Winker's 29. Yeah, Peterson's 30, so I misspoke there. But yeah, I think
I would.
Peterson's probably the safer
Mhm.
of the two, but I think I view them very similar, and I would be willing in a daily league to take one of those guys.
I would add, you've got on my list, I also have Mike Yastrzemski that I put in that boat. I think if Kelnick plays well this year, they're planning to platoon him probably with AJ Pollock. And so you're looking at Kelnick being a player you play against right-handers. I do think that the talent is still there. JJ Bleday, I haven't dug into his platoon splits, but he's going to play for Oakland. If he does hit right-handers well, he's another one that may be a player like that. Who else? I had another one. Oh, Michael Conforto. I love Conforto. And I think Conforto, they see similar things out of Conforto that they do with Peterson. And if Conforto is healthy and plays well, as we know he can, they're still going to sit him against tough left-handers, right? Are you playing Michael Conforto against Clayton Kershaw? Probably not. Are you playing him against Julio Urias? Probably not.
Right.
But Peterson is at 5 for me, in part above the rest of the guys that I named, in part because he's a known quantity, right? Kelnick could be great. Conforto could have a great season. Yastrzemski has played very well in the past, but Peterson is very predictable. And I'd rather take that predictable OPS and power over some of the other guys. I just think it's important to know if you have a player who you think is potentially going to get benched against same-handed pitching at times, specifically a left-handed hitter that mashes right-handers, just know that you're going to have to make up for him with an additional player on your roster. And are you willing to give up that spot on your roster to make that happen? But an interesting group of players. Do you have a favorite player out of that grouping?
Between the platoon players?
Yeah, so if it's Peterson, so I'll just name the ones I have here. Peterson,
Yeah.
I see Conforto in that group. I haven't looked at Seth Brown's splits. He had 555 plate appearances last year, but I assume that they may bench him against some lefties, given that they're giving a lot of players opportunity. Winker, Yastrzemski, like I said, I put Kelnick in that group, JJ Bleday. I think that is it when I look at the players that I think might platoon a bit. Do you have a player out of that group?
Yeah. I mean, I'm ready to get hurt again. For me, it's Winker.
You think you think his lack of production last year was a result of injury and solely injury?
I think injury, and it's clear he didn't fit in with that team. I mean, you had a lot of guys with Seattle that came up together that were they're a close-knit group, and he's a different personality. I don't think necessarily means he's a bad guy. I just think he didn't fit in for whatever reason, and that goes both ways. And then he was hurt, and he wanted to perform, and so I think there's a lot of things at play there. But yeah, multiple injuries, poor chemistry, and I'm just not ready to say he's done.
I agree. I'm trying to keep the bias of being a Mariners fan out out of my evaluation of Winker. And I always love that high walk rate player. I think the high walk rate, despite hitting 219, he still had a 344 on base percentage because he walks so often. Definitely a platoon player. I'd say if I'm being open and honest about it, I'd probably go Peterson again because of the proven track record.
Mm-hmm.
And the upside of that. And if how do I put this? If you were to gamble, say I said Kelnick, right?
Okay.
What is the top end? What's the top end result of Kelnick being a great platoon player in 2023? It's probably 18 to 20 home runs in 450 plate appearances and 12 steals, right? Because he's not that fast, contrary to what people thought. He's probably a 55 speed. So if you're talking about 18 home runs and 12 steals from him hitting his highest upside potential, I'll take the 23 home runs and 70 RBIs and 874 OPS from Peterson, right? Which he's
Right.
already done.
He's already done.
Porto, the risk is the injury. The talent is there, but you're still hoping that he's doing something that he hasn't done for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Winker, you're hoping he comes back from injury and it's not a talent thing and that it was an injury and chemistry thing, but there's still hope. I think he's probably the most talented bat of all of them that we just talked about. But again, I'd rather go with Peterson knowing that he's been healthy and the Giants know what to make of him and he's produced. Do you have any interest in JJ Bleday going to Oakland? He was traded there for AJ Puck about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, right. I did not have him under considerations on my list, no.
Do you have any interest in him at all as a fantasy player?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we have a TGFBI coming up where we're going to have a 5 outfielder. I would be willing to look at him closely for like a 5th, 6th outfielder type person for sure.
But
I mean, he was a pretty.
He's currently listed as hitting 7th in the Oakland order on roster resource. The player that I think that would take time from him is Christian Pache, who's listed as a reserve outfielder. I say that because he's right-handed and Bleday's left. Interestingly, looking at this, they have Ramon Laureano hitting 2nd and Seth Brown hitting 3rd. So just food for thought, if Seth Brown is the number 3 hitter, despite what you think of the Oakland offense, if he's hitting 3rd and playing every day, I think that's an interesting player. I have him as my number 14 outfield 3. He did have 55 runs, 25 homers, 73 RBIs, and 11 stolen bases last year. I think what's putting me over the top for him is the 11 steals.
What I question there is he the everyday
first baseman,
or is he a platoon player? I don't know.
I think he's a platoon player, if I'm being honest. Ryan Noda is actually very interesting to me. And Noda is also left-handed.
Mm-hmm.
He plays first in outfield. They tend to collect the, how come I can't remember him now? Scott Hatterberg types, right? I wanted to say Shea Hillenbrand, but Shea Hillenbrand is right-handed. They tend to collect those types of players, right? Historically, the first base, DH, maybe corner outfield, left-handed player, takes a walk, hits for power. So Noda is another one in that group. Like I said, I'm pretty high on Ryan Noda. Seth Brown is, I think you're right. Seth Brown could have 500 plate appearances again, or could have 200 plate appearances again, and we wouldn't really. I don't think Oakland would bat an eye. Are there any players on this list that you are either prospects or post-type prospects that you prioritize in this range that might have upside that we haven't really seen?
No, I don't think so. I think Yoshida is the wild card, and we already talked about him. Mm-hmm. I will say I have Ramon Laureano at 48 or 16 for this exercise. We were just talking about Oakland. Mm-hmm. I think, they're going to continue. It seems like they're going to continue just anything that's not nailed down, they're going to sell. So now that he's back from his PED subscription, I expect a full run of playing time for him. Mm-hmm. And while he strikes out more than I would like, and his OBP is lower, he's the only player at my 16 who's I have projected for more than 15 home runs and more than 12 steals.
Mm-hmm.
So
His 2019 is hard to ignore. He had an 861 OPS in
mm-hmm.
481 plate appearances, but he had 24 homers, 79 runs, 67 RBIs, and 13 steals. As you said, the profile is one that I tend to stay away from, the low walk rate, high K rate sort of hacker that he is, but you can't ignore double-digit homers and steals in under 400 plate appearances in the last 2 years, right?
Yeah.
There's
And he's projected to hit second,
right?
and he is a good defender. And again, I expect him to give them full run to drive up his value and try to trade him.
I agree. I think that's spot on. I don't have him in my top 16. I have him in the big, huge group of players just outside of it. I do have a couple of young players that I think are worth touching on. The first one is Riley Green. I have him at 12. I have him there. That's simply a pedigree play and an opportunity play because I've never loved his plate approach. I think there's way too much swing and miss for him being ranked as high of a prospect as he was. He was top 5 prospect.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of folks going into last year, and I don't see it. I don't see the elite speed. I know he's a good hitter. He's a very good hitter. He hits for power. I don't think he's as fast as people thought. He had a 28.7% strikeout rate last year, despite a 9.8% swinging strike rate. I just don't love his approach. That park obviously is very scary for power, despite bringing the fences in. And he had a 2.8 degree launch angle last season with a 56% ground ball rate. None of that is great, right? We know that. However, he was ranked that high as a prospect for a reason. And I think that, he's going into his age 22 season, I think this season. And they're going to give him as much opportunity to play as he could ever want. So he's not one that I'm willing to sell on, especially if I was someone who had invested in him previously yet. I do think it's worth watching both his ground ball rate and his strikeout rate at the beginning of this season. You may want to cut bait, but I'm still going to rank him here over some of the other options.
It's interesting the disparity you mentioned between his swinging strike rate and the strikeout rate. Mm-hmm. Looking at his swing rates overall, he's being pretty passive. He's only swinging it in the zone at 65%.
Yep.
And yet he's swinging outside the zone at 31%.
Right.
So that spread is less than optimal.
You wonder if he needs to get his eyes checked, honestly, when you see numbers like that.
And yet you look at his swinging strike rates in the minors, they were all in the double digits.
Right.
So it's
also he never, even as an elite prospect, he never had below a 24% strikeout rate. And he was really in 27% range most of the time with an 11% walk rate. So I don't know. I don't love him as a prospect, but would I rather have a former top 10 prospect who's 22 years old or Joey Gallo, right? Would I rather have that or Mike Yastrzemski? Would I rather have that or Nolan Jones or Jaron Duran or Mark Conha or, Garrett Mitchell or, you know what I mean? So the point is just that it's a bet on pedigree. Who else? I have MJ Melendez just outside of it. I think Melendez is, there's more proven players that I put on the list. I do think he could surpass these guys pretty quickly. But his value is not as an outfielder. If you're drafting him, his value is as a catcher. So it was worth a nod, but he's always going to play for you as a catcher, not an outfielder. Who else? I have Joe Adell. I have Kelnick, Blade, Nolan Jones, Jaron Duran, those types of players. Really, it's about picking the player that you like, right? Digging into that player. Do you believe that player can rebound or figure it out? And then drafting him low, like as low as you can in the draft. If you're an Adell fan, pick Adell. If you're a Kelnick fan, pick Kelnick. I don't have any passionate takes about any of the players I just named, but I think they were worth mentioning because they do have the potential to be on this list. Alec Thomas is another one. Christopher Morel, super interesting profile. If you believe that his his zone contact rate and swing and miss is okay. Very explosive athlete. Who else before I ramble on too long about outfield 3? Anyone else in
I
your
think
top
it.
15?
I think a couple players we haven't talked about. You mentioned Alec Thomas, a player that who is projected, it should be on this list, who neither of us have talked about, is Jake McCarthy. And he's not someone I ranked for this exercise. I really question the projection he's been given as well as the skills behind it. He is exceptionally fast, and I looked at his track record in the minors. However, he was only better than league average, like WRC plus wise, 1 year. And then he spiked a really good year at AAA last year, and he came up and he hit for a little bit of power, and he's really fast. And there's places that have him projected for 30 plus steals and full run of playing time. And I look at the young talent they have in that outfield, and I question whether he's going to play over an Alec Thomas.
Right.
You know, I know that they traded Varsho, and that's supposed to clear up their depth chart, but they still have a lot of guys that can play in the outfield. And neither of us obviously are buying him because we haven't talked about him. But I think you mentioning Alec Thomas, I think we're being a little too quick to write him off, and giving all this playing time to McCarthy. So I don't know if you have any thoughts you want to share that you saw when you were looking at him, or the Diamondbacks.
I think the Diamondbacks are just, outside of Corbin Carroll, investing in a Diamondbacks outfielder is very, very risky. The thing about McCarthy that is interesting is he was a first-round pick in 2018. And that does usually mean something to teams. Alec Thomas, interestingly, was the second-round pick in that same draft. I think Thomas has been ranked higher in prospect rankings up to the time. I think that the DH spot is going to be locked up with Gurriel and Gabriel Moreno getting some of that time. The one player in this grouping of outfielders for the Diamondbacks that I think people are sleeping on a bit is I'd say Kyle Lewis is the most talented hitter of that outfield group outside of Corbin Carroll. Kyle Lewis is an incredibly talented hitter, and he's just been injured too much. And the Mariners loved him; they thought the world of him as a hitter, but he didn't have health. So I don't have any big takes on McCarthy. I don't see the power at all, really at all. And
right, I don't either.
He's a speed play who has questionable playing time. If you're interested in that, then that's great. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back and wrap up outfield 3, and then anything else we want to cover.
Okay.
I do think it's worth mentioning a couple of young outfielders who could make an impact, specifically later in the season. But you want to watch in spring training to see if they have a regular job, because if they do secure a regular job, they have the talent to vault into outfield 2, and a couple of them actually vault into the outfield 1 conversation. They have that kind of talent. Those for me are Jordan Walker, 20-year-old right fielder for the St. Louis Cardinals. I think a consensus top 5 prospect currently on most lists. I believe I had him at 3 at my initial offseason top 100. I will probably back off that slightly, but he has legitimate 40 home run potential right out of the gates. Very powerful, 6'5", about 240 pounds at this point in time. And St. Louis had said that he will be in the mix to compete for a job. So if he has a strong spring training, do not be surprised to see Jordan Walker as the starting right fielder. And I believe he would hit probably 6th or 7th to begin with in that lineup. Also, a non-zero with speed as well, despite his size. You'd be looking at probably 10 steals or so for the first couple of years of his career. He'd be my top outfield prospect with the potential of playing in 2023. Any comments on Jordan Walker from you?
No.
Some others to look at. Oscar Colas, right field prospect for the Chicago White Sox. Cuban born, was in the Japanese minor leagues for 3 years. a left-handed prospect, powerful build, 6'1", about 210, 220 pounds. Last season, he went from high A to double A to triple A. He had 23 home runs, hit a triple slash of 314, 371, 895. Not a speed play. He did have 24 steals. I think you're looking at probably double-digit steals, but probably low double digits if he was to play a full season. Player I'm keeping an eye on. I think that he's probably going to go a little bit lower because he doesn't have quite the pedigree some of the others do. But he does have 20 home run, 10 steal potential if he does play every day in right field for the White Sox. This doesn't matter that much, but I do like that the White Sox tend to attract a lot of the Cuban-born players and have a very, I think, a very positive culture for those players to develop. And Colas was aware of that when he signed. He actually waited a full year so that he could sign with the White Sox because they had very little bonus money because he valued that culture and that infrastructure as much as he did. Comments on Colas?
Is he the one that was also a pitcher coming up?
Yes, two-way player.
Okay, I thought that. Yeah,
Fun player.
yeah, I remember that because 2 years ago he didn't sign, and I didn't know why. And then last year he did sign.
Right.
It's interesting as he moved up in levels last year. I was looking at the stats as you were reading through. His WRC plus, went up and up as he went up on the
Got
levels,
better.
even though his strikeout rate also continued to climb. But yeah, the ISO got better at every level.
Yep.
The power got better at every level. The OBP got better at every level.
Yep.
And he's a left-hander, and I like that better for that park. So, that's a great pull by you.
He is. I misspoke. So he had. I was looked at it correctly the first time. He had 3 steals. So not a speed play. I do think he has enough speed to steal 10 bags or so. And he's an aggressive type player. But not going to steal any more than that. A couple other things with him. So I have his hit tool as a 60 and his power as a 65 potential. Fun player to watch. Very, very short left-handed swing. You can see him less strikeout, less swing and miss risk than I think you would associate with a player with that kind of power. He also changes his approach a bit with 2 strikes, which I like as well. So a player to keep an eye on for sure is Oscar Colas.
So I'm looking at roster resource. I don't see him listed. So they have him starting the year in AAA then. Yep. So he's competing for a job and can't. Okay.
He is for sure.
Got it.
The assumption is that the talent wins out and that he does win that job. So they've got Gavin Sheets starting in right field as of right now. The signing of Benintendi certainly hurt. And then Eloy, as we've heard, is probably going to be not a full-time DH, but DH quite a bit. But you're not going to tell me Victor Reyes or Gavin Sheets is going to play over Colas if Colas plays well in training. So the hope is he has a great spring training and he's ready to go. The talent will eventually get him there, even if it's like a second half of the season, keep an eye on him sort of player. The last one on my list is Sal Frelick. Left-handed outfielder for the Milwaukee Brewers organization, 23 years old, former first-round pick. Reminds me of a little bit of Stephen Kwan. Reminds me a little bit of Brett Butler for those of our age group. Left-handed outfielder for both first the Indians, then the Dodgers and the Giants. I don't love Sal Frelick. I think that he does have what I consider to be a 60 hit tool, 50 power and 65 speed. The speed rating is not the pure speed as much as it is. He is fast, but it's more so his instincts on the base paths I think are pretty good. I think he's a 30 steal, potentially a 30 steal player, and with double digit home runs. Not my favorite player, but has first round pedigree, an opportunity in Milwaukee. I think Tyrone Taylor is the player that's ahead of him on the depth chart right now, probably. They also have Garrett Mitchell, whose success is up in the air. But Sal Frelick is worth mentioning. If he does have a spot at the top of that order, you're looking at 100 runs and high OBP and, like I said, 25 to 30 steals with the potential to hit double-digit home runs. So good player. Keep an eye on him. Thoughts on Frelick from you?
Yeah, the thing that stuck out to me about Frelick when I studied him, he was a player that that I have done a little bit of homework on is his swinging strike rate.
Hmm.
He was in the 98.3rd percentile. And his contact rate was 91.7% in the zone. However, his hard hit rates were in the bottom 25%.
Right.
So yeah, definitely. But those contact rates, along with the speed, and his ability to take a walk, are what stuck out to me.
Hmm.
And yeah, I wonder what the plan is for their outfield and if he's going to get a shot before like Terang or somebody like that, because they have enough moving parts where, you know, they could bring Terang up first and move, someone out to left field or whatever. Or do they to actually open up a spot for him in the outfield? But I think
I,
the power speed for fantasy, or that power speed, that hit tool and the speed for fantasy are really intriguing to me.
mhm. I'd say that from an organizational perspective, Frelick is a more talented player than Terang. I don't think that Terang is going to keep Frelick from playing. I think Tyrone Taylor could, because I think Tyrone Taylor actually performed pretty well last year. Um,
Hmm.
but Frelick is too good of a player. I think too talented of a player to for that to be the case. I do think he and Joey Weimer eventually are going to be competing for some time. They're different, like complete opposite types of players.
Yeah, right.
But Frelick is going to be their table setter. I think it's pretty clear that they want him to do that. He's got the pedigree to do that. He hit 331 with an 883 OPS last season and at three levels. He's 23 years old, so they're not keeping him back because of age. I think he does get the opportunity. It would not. I think there is probably a greater than 50% chance he actually opens up as a starting outfielder for the Brewers in
Wow.
2023. Uh,
Is he in camp? Is he on the 40?
I believe he's on the 40. I'd have to double
Okay.
check, but my assumption is that he is. Um, the only other note I have is I don't love and Corbin Carroll does this too. Carroll does it. Robert Hassel does it. Ichiro was the one who really did it. That like left-handed kind of recoil sort of swing makes me a little nervous because there's so many moving parts at that point in time that you wonder if Major League Pitching can exploit that with velocity. So I do worry about that with Frelick's power a little bit, but he's certainly going to get on base. So Frelick, Jordan Walker, Oscar Colas are the three outfielders that I see with the potential to get real playing time this season and have the talent to place themselves in the outfield 2, outfield 3 conversation. Any other outfielders that we missed with outfield 3 that you want to mention? There are a couple that I haven't called out yet. Mitch Haniger was one. I know we talked about him previously. Brandon Marsh is another who I think is going to get ample opportunity to play and has pedigree, but is not really performed as of yet. Who else do I have here? We talked about McCarthy, Dylan Carlson. Do you have any takes on Dylan Carlson? Because he came up with quite a bit of hype.
I don't. I think I think he's gonna have to do something to unlock some power to
Mm-hmm.
play. I like the plate approach. He's a good all around athlete, can be, decent glove out there, but I think without some power in the outfield, he's gonna have to make an approach change, I think.
Whit Merrifield, Jaron Duran, those types of players, kind of speed only.
Yeah.
I don't love either.
South Prairie Lake, by the way, is not on the 40.
He's
So
not.
no. So
So he
they would
was
have to do a roster move.
I assume he was a non-roster invitee.
Yes,
I don't.
he is on the spring training. He is on the spring training roster, but he's not on the 40, which hopefully it wouldn't be a barrier. I'd love to see him get a chance to play, honestly.
Cool.
Especially if he's in the pool in our league, which I question, but we'll see.
Mhm.
Honestly, I think the player, Tino, that we haven't talked about that we would be remiss not to mention is Nick Castellanos.
Mhm.
Um, he's a player that when he was coming off of contract he signed with the Phillies last year, I think he was in my outfield too, in the middle to lower third.
Mhm.
Someone I pushed down because of the walk rate and swinging strike rates. However, he was someone that had a track record of hitting the ball really hard, hitting for a good average. And then I don't know what your opinion is on what he was dealing with last year, but his his barrel rate plummeted, his hard hit rate plummeted. He posted a career high ground ball rate, career high infield fly ball rate. Just everything from a bat metric standpoint took a step backward. He posted a career high 70% swinging strike rate. If you look at the swinging strike rate, it's been progressively ticking up over the last 3 or 4 years.
Yep.
However, he continued to perform in spite of that. He's someone that consistently would be in the upper 20 percentile on Savant for XBA and XLUG despite the swinging strike rates. So I don't know if I'd be curious to hear from what you saw. Is this kind of the marker of the end, or is this of someone with that plate profile that just swings so much, or would you just mark it off as a bad year, potentially an injury that he was playing through, and then he reverts back to his career mean? Because to me, like, if you revert him back 20% towards his career norms in year 2 in Philly, in terms of his hard hit rates, his barrel rates, he's someone that's basically going to be a value where he's going, because there's so much pullback based on the year he had last year.
Yeah, he's an outfield 2 at that point, right?
Yeah, exactly.
If he gets back to that. So, okay, how do I walk through this? This is actually, I think, a good to walk through this step by step in my head, like out loud, because his approach has been so aggressive and his walk rates have not been good. I tend to think of those players as players who are going to go up and down with a lot more than players with better approaches. So here's something interesting. In 21, he hit 357 with the 776 slug against the 4-seam fastball for a run value of plus 20. Okay. In 2022, he hit 265, so almost a 100-point reduction with a 460 slug, which is over a 300-point reduction against the 4-seamer for a run value of positive 5. Okay.
Right.
So a 15-run reduction in run value against the 4-seam. In every year that he's been successful, he's hit the 4-seamer really, really well. So in 17, it was an 18 plus 18 run value. In 19, so with the Tigers, it was a plus 5 run value, right, in that big park. 18 was with the Tigers as well. 19, it was plus 17. 21, it was plus 20. So something was going on with the fastball that he couldn't hit the fastball in the same way that he had previously, right? That much is clear. Whiff rate went up over 7% from 21 to 22. It had, to me, that screams, so, okay, big contract, pressure. We all understand that. In his head a bit about playing in Detroit because the park was so big. I don't know that he made any real swing adjustments necessarily, but to me, there's an approach issue that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
If you take approach issue, some maybe lack of, I don't want to say mental strength, but he was susceptible to some of those things about the park in Detroit. If you take a player like that, he needs everything in his corner to go well in order to perform well. So whether it's the pressure of a new contract and or potentially an injury, right? He could no longer hit the 4-seam, which was his bread and butter. So the question is, what if it was the adjustment of the contract? Is year 2 going to be better? If he was hurt and wasn't talking about it, is he going to be healthy this year? But then you also have to include the fact that he is, how old is he now?
30.
He's 30, so he's kind of on the backside. He's a player that I think if it was low enough, where I could pick him, I would consider him. I am certainly not picking him to be a regular in my outfield, whether it is outfield 3, 4, or 5. I just think that there's way, way too much risk. I'll let someone else take him higher. And there's nothing in his profile last year that says to you, like I'm looking at his, I don't want to say a bubble whore, but I don't look at the Savant bubbles and just make my decisions based on that.
Yeah.
But his bubbles are blue, right? They're not red.
Yep.
The max exit is pink, and that's about it. XBA is, I'm pretty colorblind, but I guess sprint speed, XBA, and max exit are the only ones that are even remotely pink.
Right.
It's not good. Not good for a 30-year-old with a bad approach. So I don't know, man. He had a really great year. But I don't think we're gonna see that year come back again. That's my take. I'll let someone else take
Fair
it.
enough.
Anybody
Fair
else
enough.
on this list that you want to mention or you're passionate about?
No, no, I love the South Rio Lake mention. That was awesome. I think a couple other players, or one other player, if you are really want an interesting speed play, we talked a little bit about what volume and defense can do. Jose Siri for the Rays. I know they love his glove in center. It's why they finally, moved one away from Kiermaier. They really value center field defense. And his plate field, so you can come out Castellanos, very poetic. His plate approach is horrendous. But he does have some pop, and he's exceptionally quick and fast. So, if you can stomach that plate approach, he's someone that might be a sneaky source of speed and volume. I wouldn't necessarily want to take him, but to me, if I was going for speed, they're lesser, more poor. Like I'd rather have him than say like the Guardian center fielder Miles Straw, because I think he at least has some home run power in the bat. So if you're down in that kind of range, like I don't know, I just think he might see a different level of playing time than we've seen him have. And he is exceptionally fast, and might be a little under the radar. But
Siri's
again, horrendous
gonna
plate approach.
test your stomach for. So I always say speed and power is king in fantasy, but he would really test your tie to that idea. So projections do have him, all Fangraphs projections, Bat X, Bat ATC, Steamer, Zips. They all have him for double-digit homers and steals, right? All of them. And yet every OPS is sub 700. So I think if you catch him on a hot streak and somebody's injured, sure, but outside of that, I'd rather have the player that doesn't hurt me anywhere. Give me the
35% K rate. Sound good to you?
Yeah, let me prioritize the Ian Happs of the world. A little bit higher in the draft than Jose Siri. This wraps up outfield 3. I think that I don't think there's a lot of util players other than Ohtani to really talk about. So we probably won't do a util episode. So are we going to get into SP1 next week?
I think we might
get into the meat and potatoes of our analysis. Good stuff. I do have one thought. Outfield is just not very deep. It's really easy I think, to shit on the players that provide kind of across the board consistent production that aren't really exciting players. George Springer, right? We talked about Suzuki and Reynolds. I ragged on that a little bit. But those players, I think, are more valuable than I'll speak for myself, than I really give them credit for. When you start to look at this outfield 3 list, it's crappy, right? And so if you have a player that's giving you 25 home runs and 80 to 90 RBIs and 80 to 90 runs and some semblance of stolen bases and an 800 plus OPS, I think I'm just saying it's more valuable, I think, than we give it credit for. And you can build a championship team out of those types of players. So keep that in mind when drafting. And also maybe it creates an even more of a sense of urgency in getting one of the top 7 or 8 outfielders at the top of drafts.
I'm excited to see where our PDS should process tonight for our 2 GFPI draft and start making a draft plan where what our plan is in the outfield. I think we built around Acuna last year and that worked very well.
And Julio.
I left in a 5 outfielder league. I don't think you can wait too long before you start to have to build and add talent out there.
Not at all. Again, looking at my outfield 1, I'm seeing names like Arozarena and Mullins and Buxton and Springer, and you can debate whether those belong on an outfield one list, but the reality is that's how shallow outfield truly is, which runs so counter to what I think my assumptions are about outfield. Do you have any open forum questions? Anything burning right now, given that baseball's on the way?
No, not really. No.
We got spring training coming up. Friday, Saturday, actually, there are games, I think. So
yeah, I got my tickets for Friday, Saturday. I had a heck of a time with Ticketmaster and the Rockies for Saturday's game, but I got that all straightened out, thankfully.
Sweet. And then we have games this week that we can watch, which is awesome. Pretty soon too, we'll get back into opening some cards and sharing some of that as well. I don't.
So, am I allowed to open the 2022 cards, or do I have to go buy more?
Do whatever you want. Open whatever you want, bro.
Because I still got packs from Ken too that
I do too.
I need to get into. So
I do too.
With the old budget belt being tightened up, I'm gonna have to work with what I have.
Nah, let's do what we have. Cool, man. Anything else?
No.
Right on. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Got, what is it? 2 weeks from tomorrow.
Yeah, on the plane
for some spring training.
Yep.
Awesome.
Appreciate you. Tino. You're well. Bye.